food. Soon it became obvious we'd all have to spend the night down there. So I found a corner as far away from Amy as possible and lay down. I was still shivering and thought about using the insect-infested blanket, but Amy had already grabbed it. There was no way I'd fall asleep. I was so thirsty, and even though the shelter luckily had a small toilet, there was no sink, which meant no running water. I'd have drunk the rain earlier if I knew this was going to happen. I covered my ears because I was afraid I'd hear them kissing, and eventually I must have fallen asleep because the next moment I found myself waking up to hearing a rustling sound. I looked over at Amy, and even though I couldn't see anything, I knew she was eating something. I could hear her. I couldn't believe she had food with her and wasn't sharing it. Did James know? I should have said something, but I was too scared. I'd already caused enough trouble. Finally, morning came, and by then my phone was at 2%. Soon, I wouldn't even know what time it was. I was bursting for the toilet, so I went to use it, and of course, Amy shouted at me and said my peeing was too loud and had woken her up. Then I noticed there was a light switch outside the toilet. I clicked on it, not expecting it to work, and suddenly the whole shelter was flooded with light. Amy quickly pulled the blanket up and told me to look away. Oh my gosh, were they not wearing clothes? Then Amy just laughed and said everyone knows that body heat is the best way to survive in cold weather. Ew! Once they got dressed, I realized how pretty Amy was, and it really annoyed me. How could I have thought James would ever be interested in someone like me when he had Amy? I ran up the stairs and tried to push the lid again, but then I just sat there waiting for people to arrive at school. Then I'd scream my head off. Plus, I didn't want them to look at me. I felt so insecure about my running clothes, and I hadn't even shaved my legs. I didn't want James noticing. I could hear the school bell and feet walking over us, but no one heard me scream. How long would we be down here? James was complaining about being hungry and Amy too, but I knew Amy had eaten something in the night. She was a liar. We started looking around the place to see if we could find anything, and James suddenly sounded happy. Under the sandbags, he'd found some old bottles of water. The water looked disgusting, but I'd have drunk anything by that point. Both James and I downed like a liter each, but Amy refused. Suit yourself, I thought. Then about an hour later, I started getting a weird pain in my stomach. Oh no, there was no toilet paper. This couldn't be happening. I had to run and almost puked my guts up. And I wasn't the only one. James raced in after me, and at one point, we were both lying on the floor taking it in turns to vomit. Not exactly what I had in mind for our first date together. That water must have been 20 years old or something. Amy got seriously annoyed and even tried to drag James out of the bathroom. Was she jealous? And then I